Our next two speakers are Kathy Kennedy and Michelle Kearns from BCIT. Kathy is the Associate Dean for Specialty Nursing in the School of Health Sciences at BCIT. She developed a passion for a variety of simulation deliveries to enhance the learner experience and better prepare them for challenges of the clinical environment. Kathy's interests in simulation led to original development of the virtual pulse application, and she continues to advance this application as a co-lead of virtual pulse product. Michelle is the manager of simulation learning for the School of Health Sciences at BCIT, and she's been designing, developing, and facilitating simulations and learning activities for over 30 years. With that, I'll pass it on to both Kathy and Michelle to enlighten us with their talk.
Great, thank you very much. I think Michelle is just sharing the screen right now. Thank you again for having us here today. Some fantastic topics. We are here to talk today about a product that we developed in-house at BCIT to really empower our healthcare professionals. So we designed a screen-based virtual simulation, and I'll just get you to skip to the next slide, Michelle. It's an interactive, very interactive web-based simulation, creating some patient scenarios, common ones and less common ones that our learners might be experiencing. And I think, you know, to what you were speaking about earlier in the conference, and the idea of integrative thinking, and we're thinking about problems that we need solutions for. And sometimes when we go down this path of using technology, we want to make sure that we are actually answering a problem that we have, and we're not just using technology because it's sort of fun and interesting to look at. And we really did have a problem, and our problem was around clinical capacity, having enough space for our learners in those areas, and also preparing our learners so that they were able to work in these types of environments. So it started when we had a pediatric emergency program, and we needed to make sure that our students were learning what they needed to know in the clinical environment. So an example might be a child in a house fire. They might spend time in the clinical environment, our learners, but they may never see that. So how do we ensure that they're prepared to deal with that type of clinical presentation? And so we really worked hard, Michelle and I and our team, to make sure that this web-based approach was realistic enough, and that it was customizable and moving ahead at an approach that our learners were going to feel like they had a very realistic experience. And so I think the best part that has come out for us is how we've empowered our learners by preparing them for these challenging clinical environments, easing their anxiety before they go into their clinical placements. And then it also allows for this reflective clinical practice, so they can try these things at home and in our classroom environments before they're actually in the clinical area. And so what we've seen is the students doing this, and then when they do go into the clinical environment, they're hitting the ground running a lot more prepared and faster, and able to kind of enhance our growth and thinking in those areas. And so with that being said, I know we're short time frame, so I'm going to turn it over to Michelle so she can demonstrate what I've been talking about.
Thanks, Kathy. So all of our case studies have two components, and one is the theory or the content side of things, and the other one is the highly interactive virtual simulation. And again, one way we empower our learners is that we allow them to choose whichever path they want to go to first. Some people really like to focus on the theory. Some people want to jump right into that application. But no matter what, it's most important that after any simulation, they do that debriefing part. They do that self-reflection. They think about their thinking. And so that's very, very critical. I'm going to jump right into the actual virtual simulation aspect of it. And we do have a short video that I'd like to share with you. The very beginning of this does have the sounds, because it's so important that these learners hear those realistic sounds that they're going to hear in the setting so that they can do the proper assessment. Then you won't hear any sound. You're going to hear me speaking, and I'll talk through some of the things that are actually happening. So let's take a look at our first patient, Mark. Now, Now, I'm assuming you could hear that. Unfortunately, Mark came into the emergency room. He has tested positive for COVID. He has very difficulty breathing. And this is one of those things we have to be able to have the learners hear. Heart sounds, lung sounds. They have to be able to hear that coughing. I don't know if you've noticed, there's also the importance of what they can see in those actions. In this case, our patient is quite distressed. He has head pain, he's had a head trauma. And so they need to be able to see that. In this particular patient, her sedation is not correct. She's intubated, but she really needs to be able to, we need to be able to adjust the settings of the ventilator. So most of the equipment in this virtual simulation, actually all of it, is interactive. So our ventilators, the students can go in and change these settings, the monitor, they can get information. I'll show you just a few seconds of that, where you can see they can change the FiO2. And then they can go in just a few minutes and run some lab results to see how is this impacting the patient. They can look at other monitoring, ECGs, and get that information too. I also wanted to showcase that there are some very difficult things that the learners are not able to do in some simulated environments. And so this shows an example of an eye exam where they can get really close to our patient avatars and they can actually assess these eyes. And they can actually use the form and document their findings. It's very important that they document their findings. Here's another example of something that's very difficult to do in a simulation lab. So this patient has a head injury. And again, those actions are difficult. In this case, we also have medication administration. And so it's a non-linear program. That means the learners can choose to look at the patient's chart first, they can communicate first, they can just go straight to interventions. In this case, the learner says, well, let me see what happens if I try to give fentanyl. So we pop up with a message saying, sorry, I can't let you do that. We want the learner to be safe and we want the patient to be safe. It's very, very important. And then what I want to show you is actually, if I don't know what to do next, I'm going to pause this for just a minute. We have this progress bar going across the screen. That lets me know I'm almost to the end of helping resolve this case. This down below is showing those are all of my actions that I've taken. But if I don't know, what else am I supposed to do? We're not just going to leave those learners alone. We can give them some clinical feedback. Once they go to the clinical feedback screen, they can see, here are all the actions that I took. Here are the critical actions, only 83%. I can click view remaining and I can see this is what I should have done or what I need to do. So I can either restart or continue this case. So this is just a very quick high-level overview of the Virtual Pulse interactive virtual simulation. We do have more than just elderly patients, though, who are suffering from COVID. These are our 4 COVID patients. Our patients are from middle-aged to women of childbearing years, and all the way, to even neonatal babies. So, Kathy, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and maybe you can talk about where we're going next.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. So we've also begun to move this into a mixed reality, so an augmented reality or virtual reality settings. So you can see these are some of our learners in our simulation lab at BCIT. And if you look at that screen that beside them, that's what they're looking at. And so there's actually, with those goggles that they're wearing, there's actually a patient in front of them who's having a seizure, and you can see how they're moving in, they're caring for this patient because it's very real for them. And so we're able to design whatever kind of patients we want, if it's a trauma patient or a seizing patient, because we want our learners to experience this in a no risk environment, so that when they are in the clinical setting, they feel more prepared and they're able to interact. And so for these 3, when we interviewed them afterwards, it was very real for them. So they're seeing what you see on the screen beside them. That's okay. Perfect timing, Michelle. And I think what we're also very excited about is just a real global reach for this work that we're doing. And so we do have amazing simulation labs at BCIT, as do other schools. And then we have offered this, our Virtual Pulse, across Canada to learners, but we do, the opportunity is for this to go anywhere, for anybody to have access and bring our simulation labs into their living rooms and into their classrooms anywhere in the world, so that they can have that same experience working through those same kind of cases. And so we're very, very excited for that. Perfect. And I think we're stayed within our time frame, and we're happy to answer any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy and Michelle, for that. This is amazing. Like, I even had a little bit of the background as to what you guys are doing, but like to see you present it, just totally amazing. And I don't know how long that this has been in the work, but so when did this project actually start to be developing this software?
Thank you for asking. Gosh, Michelle, I think we're 5 years in. And as I mentioned, we started small, and it was really just to do with the pediatric emergency. And then we realized that there was a need right across. And so we began developing in all of our specialty areas, as well as our BSN nursing program. And it's just expanded very quickly, and the feedback has been exceptional from our learners.
Yeah, it's a great work. And like how timely, like you had no idea that there was going to be a pandemic and that we would be moving more and more into this space. So you pivot long before that we knew that it was actually, I guess, a necessary, or at least a very good thing to be doing. I'm just here in awe with my mouth dropped open watching it. Do we have any questions from the audience for BCIT? We're seeing some comments come up about acknowledging the great work that you guys are doing there. Is there, oh, here's one. Is the plan to, like you said, you have the potential to go global. So is that the plan of BCIT, of, you know, stretching out and being able to provide this type of learning and training, we'll say, beyond the current BCIT student population?
I think for Michelle and I and the rest of us at BCIT, we're really passionate about the learner and making sure that it's not just available to people here in BC, and that this is something that could be available worldwide. And I think that there are several countries that struggle with that clinical piece. And this is not just for nurses. We've had a number of healthcare professionals, respiratory therapists, physicians, and so on, work with this same platform. And for us, it's really about making sure that we just want to get it out there to as many people. And of course, there's certain things we would need to do for different countries if we need to change some of the medications, some of the protocols and processes in there. And then we've been having conversations about adjusting the languages so that it works for multiple countries. But I don't know, Michelle, if you have anything more to add, but we're quite interested in moving into that.
No, absolutely. I agree, Kathy. We are working on French translation for the content right now. So that's one example of some of the customization that we're doing.
Perfect. We have a few more questions, but I'll take one. Have you considered doing a similar type of work for primary care settings?
And I think this would be an excellent use for primary care settings. We've certainly been using it in some of our rural areas across British Columbia to prepare them. And so our learners that are in Bella Bella, Bella Coola, etc., have been using this because they don't get that frequency. And so they might get a really sick patient in once every 6 months. And so to keep their skills up, and this is a great opportunity for them to use it. So certainly our learners that are taking our specialty nursing courses have been working through platforms, and they're working in rural areas.
Perfect, thank you. We also have another question here. And I know this is from actually one of our patient partners that we've worked with over the years. And their question is, have you engaged patients in the development and the testing of this technology?
Absolutely. It's interesting when we started down this path, and even the patients that you see there are real people for the most part that we've scanned and, you know, been able to work with them on that. And then certainly at BCIT, we have the subject matter experts that work closely with all of these patients to ensure that what we have is the most current for treatments and for care for our patients. Michelle, you might have more thoughts on that.
Well, it's interesting that we were bringing in an Indigenous model, a woman in her 60s, to help us with one of our patient cases. And she had brought it to our attention that, you know, normally I would not go into the setting alone. I would bring my daughter with me or my granddaughter. I would bring someone else with me. And so that really opened our eyes as far as, okay, we need to look at bringing someone else into the setting. And so she wasn't an actual patient at that time, but it was really important to, you know, get that perspective.
Thank you very much. That was a great talk. But in the spirit